Hello, my name is Serena Lau, and I'm the Environmental Education and Outreach Specialist for the San Francisco Bay Bird Observatory, or SFBBO for short. We're a nonprofit dedicated to conserving birds and their habitats through science and outreach. For the last 40 years, we've had scientists and volunteers in the field conducting avian research and restoring habitat for wildlife in the Bay Area. We've also been educating the community to inspire people to support our local birds and the environment. We were asked by our friends at the Los Gatos Library to participate in our nature stories to journal about our springtime wildlife. And I was so excited to participate because nature journaling often involves using many of the same observational skills as our science work. So one of our longest running science programs is the Colonial Waterbird Program. Our scientists and volunteers have been monitoring colonial waterbirds around the bay since 1982, which means that we track herons, egrets, terns, gulls, and other birds that nest in colonies or groups. This data allows us to document changes in these bird populations and track the timing of nesting and how that changes over time. So we actually monitor a colony at Vasona Lake County Park in Los Gatos, and I thought that would be a great place to visit and journal about. So I contacted our volunteer and board member, Christine Zach, who monitors the colony there, and I asked her to share some information about the birds she monitors. So let's go visit Vasona Lake and talk to Christine.
Hi, I'm Christine Zach, and I'm a colonial waterbird monitor with San Francisco Bay Bird Observatory. We're here at Vasona Lake, where there is a colony that lives out on the little island in the middle of the Vasona Lake Reservoir. For herons, colonies are also called heronries, so you might hear me use that word as well. Currently, we have great blue herons that are nesting out at the site. Last year we had 2 nests. This year we have 1 so far. They can go more than once in a year, so these 2 could re-nest potentially. On the backside of the island, we also have black-crowned night herons, and then you might see throughout the park, especially along the edges where the vegetation grows over the water, there are some green herons that nest here at Lake Vasona. Throughout the year, you might have seen these great blue herons. They are gray and white, and they have a very distinctive black eye stripe. Sometimes you'll see them on the lawns here at Vasona, which is a little shocking because they seem to be water birds. But they do actually hunt small mammals, so they could be staring at a squirrel burrow or a gopher hole. They are sit and wait predators, so they sit still, they wait for something to come close, and then they get it real quick. There is the belief that they spear their food. Sometimes they might, sometimes they might just catch it. But they do have that very distinctive long bill that can be used to hunt and forage. That makes them at the top of the food chain. Same thing with the other species of herons here. They all eat little fish. They're opportunistic eaters, so they'll eat little frogs, crustaceans, invertebrates that they find around in the water. Sometimes you'll also see both species of the herons out on the lawn picking up sticks, and that's a good way to know that nesting season has begun. Great blue herons nest a little bit earlier in the year than black crowns and green herons. Currently, there are just had hatch, and you may not be able to hear it over the geese, but if you can hear this tick, 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 tick noise, that's actually the babies, the chicks, begging to their mother. If you want to learn bird sounds, a really great way to do that is to actually listen to them and either say them out loud or make up a story. So for me, I always think of like the Roadrunner cartoons, and I hear tick, tick, tick like the cartoon bomb, and that's how I know that we have hatch at my colonies. Because usually you can't see them. They're in these very big nests that are really high up or really well hidden. That's why they're colonial birds. They like to nest in a big colony because it gives them more protection. Especially out on an island like this, there are no ground predators, so they don't have to worry about cats and raccoons and other things that are predators on the ground. They only really have to worry about aerial predators like hawks and eagles. And again, being in that big number, that's a lot of adults to warn you if predator is coming and help defend your territory. So both these species can live in colonies up to 50 or 100 around the bay. Here we just have a few. But why do we monitor colonial waterbirds? We monitor them because they are a good indicator around the bay of how our ecology is doing. Being those top predators, as pollutants and other things circulate up the food chain, they are very susceptible to things like that. They're also very susceptible to habitat degradation. to loss of habitat like marshlands that have happened around the bay, and they're amazingly quick to recover though. So as we participate, San Francisco Bay Bird Observatory, in the bay restoration plan, as more and more areas become tidal marsh again, they can grow and move into those territories very quickly from any of these breeding populations throughout the South Bay. So knowing how they're doing is a vital part of sustaining the population within the bay and moving us towards our efforts of bird conservation and bird recovery in the bay.
A big thanks to Christine for all of that great information. I learned so much and I really enjoyed watching the great blue herons. So I decided to journal about the heron nest and what I observed. So here is the first page of my nature journal from my visit to Vasona Lake. And I, of course, decided to focus on that great blue heron nest that Christine showed us. So here I have drawn out one of the adults, and I decided not to draw one of the chicks because I couldn't really see it that well, so I just decided to focus on the adult. And so I sketched that out here, and when I do a nature journal, I also like to point out some of the features of the bird, and that really helps me to appreciate some of the details on the bird and helps me to really use those observation skills and remember what the bird ends up looking like. So here I have pointed out that the bird had a really long pointy beak, a long neck and long legs, and I also noticed those long feathers on its chest and its wing that were really beautiful and delicate looking. And then I also pointed out that it had a short tail, so that was a nice contrast to all these long features on the bird. And this is a pencil sketch, so I didn't add any color. I'm not as confident in my ability to accurately capture the colors that I saw on the bird, but I did write that down. I pointed out the different colors and patterns on different parts of the bird. So when I nature journal, I like to take note of the conditions of the day. So I wrote down that it was sunny, clear, and cool. So it was a really nice day to be out. And I wrote down that we visited this great blue heron nest, which was located on an island in the lake, and that the nest appeared to be made out of sticks. So I drew that here on the bottom. And I noted that we had 2 adults that were tending to the nest, and it looked like there were 2 chicks in the nest. And I wrote down the observation that one of the adults would sometimes fly off and bring back a stick. And sometimes it would land on another branch in the tree before returning to the nest. So as Christine mentioned, maybe they'll start a second nest. And so we'll have to wait and see what Christine ends up observing. Whenever I nature journal, I also like to take note of the sounds that I hear because that's another kind of observation. So I wrote down that we mostly heard Canada geese honking and some nearby mallards quacking. And if you remember, Christine mentioned that the chicks make that tick, tick, tick sound, and I did get to hear that. So I wrote down that maybe they're telling their parents that they're hungry when they make that sound. And when I nature journal, I also like to write down the other birds that I observe, the other species. So here I have a list of that written down. So that includes, of course, the mallards and the Canada geese. And I did see a pair of Canada geese with a bunch of goslings. So those are the baby geese. So those are really cute. They were fluffy and really fun to see. And I also wrote down that we saw a great egret, and there was actually one that had perched on top of that same tree where the great blue heron nested. And other birds I saw included western bluebirds, and a green heron, which was really fun to watch. So the green heron is another species that Christine mentioned, nests at Vasona Lake, that if she finds any, she'll monitor the nests. So I got to watch one actually spending some time doing a little bit of hunting and preening, so cleaning itself and doing some self-care there. And then a few other species I saw included swallows, especially northern ruffling swallows in a tree, some American coots, which are really common to see in lakes, and some house finches, including both males and females. Now, on the second page of my nature journal, I decided to challenge myself and focus on things that were not birds. So I noted that I was very lucky to see several reptiles that day, And the highlight was this gopher snake that I saw. So here I sketched out the head and a little bit of that body pattern that I noticed. And I was really excited because I don't often really get to see snakes. And this snake was just so beautiful as it was slithering towards the lake along the trail. And it was pretty long, so it must have been at least 2 or 3 feet long, probably a little bit longer. And I also noted that as I was observing it, I also overheard 2 people pointing it out to a child. And the way they were describing it was appreciating the snake and not really being afraid of it, which I really appreciated because snakes are a really important part of the ecosystem, and gopher snakes in particular are non-venomous. They're not dangerous to us. So as long as we leave it alone, there's no reason to be afraid of it or to demonize it. So I was really pleased to hear that they were appreciating the snake and they weren't afraid of it. In addition to the snake, I also saw a couple of turtles basking in the sun. They were on a log, kind of sitting in the lake. And they were a little bit backlit, so from the sun I couldn't really see a lot of their details. And there was also glare from the lake, so again, I just couldn't see it that well. So instead I drew out the silhouettes of the turtles that I saw. And I also noted that after I saw these turtles, I ended up seeing a western fence lizard scurrying along the trail. And these lizards move really fast, so I didn't get a great look at it, so I decided not to draw it. But I noted that it had stopped for a moment and did some push-ups. And that's really common for western fence lizards to do. Many of them do that for territory displays or mating displays, so I wrote down that I wondered who it was showing off for. Now, in addition to all the birds and the reptiles, I also noted that I saw lots of California ground squirrels, and I wanted to also take note of some of the trees and plant life. So on my way back towards my car, I noticed that there were some flowers that I had never seen before, and they were this really bright yellow, and the leaves were this kind of shape that reminds me of a clover or a shamrock, and each of the leaflets were heart-shaped, so that was kind of cute. And I wasn't familiar with this flower, so what I did was I took a picture of it and I uploaded it to an app called iNaturalist. And what iNaturalist does is it takes your photo, and based on what it looks like and the location you're at, it'll give you some suggestions for what you saw. And other iNaturalist users can also make suggestions and confirm what you saw. So using iNaturalist, I learned that the flower that I saw is called a Bermuda buttercup, which is a non-native species, and apparently it can spread quite easily and can be pretty hard to get rid of, so it is considered to be a weed, unfortunately. But that is really good to be aware of, and so I definitely learned a lot of new things on my experience at Vasona Lake, and taking the time to make all of these observations. I really enjoyed my time out there, and I really enjoyed this experience of really taking in what I was observing.
Thank you so much to our friends at the Los Gatos Library for inviting SFBBO to share our nature stories. We hope you'll go outside and enjoy some birds, listen to their songs, or just appreciate any nature that speaks to you.